G'day, mate. So many people talk about the difficulty of TBC and what we could do versus what happened with Classic. Now, the fool's folly seems to be to simply suggest upping the HP of bosses. Now, when I say fool's folly, I mean that's the kind of thing that I was like, why can't we just give them bigger health pools? And everyone kind of sort of seems to reply, well, all that does is just add a bit of time onto the fight. And I kind of go, well, you know, isn't that the point? Then we get to see more phases of certain fights. But tell me why that might be a bit of an error just to simply buff a boss's HP, and what else could be done in terms of difficulty.
Just to start off as well, Josh knows how to shut me up. So if he wanted me quiet, I would be quiet. A.
That is true.
B. I think that's a fantastic question. I think the problem is, especially when you look at, if you look at like tier 5 as a case study, or tier 4 as a case study, adding more HP to these bosses won't make the other mechanics feel more meaningful when you can just ignore them because of the lack of damage going out, because of the amount of healing throughput that you're going to be able to do even in tier 3 gear, even if it were tier 2.5 gear, even in tier 2, the amount of stuff that you could do there because of how those items were, were actually created, much more, like powerful than their, later counterparts. So the progression slowed a lot, especially moving into tier 4. So you look at a fight like, let's say, Leotheris the Blind. If the whirlwind damage, and this is the, more or less like the third boss technically in SSC, maybe he's, the last one you can do it in different orders. But let's say Leotheris the Blind. If you don't have his fire damage dealing enough, warlocks don't have to run that fire resist gear. They don't have to farm it previously, right? You don't have that extra mechanic added in because you can just ignore it. If the whirlwind damage isn't a lot, people are just going to tunnel him during the whirlwind phase when he's in human form, and people are just going to brute force through it. Right, that additional HP won't really matter because the fights are going to be short unless it's a ridiculous amount of HP and people are fighting in rage timers. Then all it's going to do is it's going to change it from, okay, we just have to min-max every comp. It's going to change to an issue of you need to class stack aggressively. You need to have these super, super meta comps because it's not about player skill. It's about how you can min-max. So you have that difficulty when you just focus it on a rage timers. Whereas if you make it so, hey, if your players are dodging the whirlwind, they're going to live. The HP pool of the boss is still left relatively untouched or increased, but not increased solely, then you have it more on the players themselves and the individual choices they're making, whether or not they're paying attention, whether or not they're really living in that moment, whether or not they're good players, to determine who clears content instead of who class stacks or instead of who can just enter the raid.
That's a really good point, and I feel like a dummy now for not having thought of it regarding the class stacking. Melderon, we haven't heard from you from a bit, mate. Is there anything you'd like to say about what North just said and overall about how you feel about difficulty tweaks in TBC, given what we saw in Classic?
Yeah, so North made a lot of good points there, and I echo a lot of what he said. The thing is, when you make an encounter difficult, right, it's not a button you push to make it more engaging. Everyone wants an engaging encounter, and as I've been healing in Classic, and I don't usually heal, and it's one of those things where it's a lot of encounters, I'm like, one, I'm not even resto, because I was an AK-40 has been kind of a joke for us, and I roll in an elemental and do damage. And if you're a healer and you're not healing, and you can think to yourself, man, I probably could damage this fight, or I have time to throw out some lightning bolts instead of healing. That's not fun. At least to me, it's not. So how do you make something engaging? And it's not like North said, is it increasing hit points? Probably not. Is it increasing the amount of times a mechanic happens? Maybe. Is it the damage that it puts out to the tank in the raid? And these are the things that, so as you can tell, this is a very complex thing. And I hate going back to my old point, but this is who are we deciding makes that decision? Is it us? Is it the way that old school RuneScape does it with a 70% vote? I would love that to be implemented in the game, but it's not. How do we determine whether it's hard for us? A lot of us, we all raid pretty high end, and we are a minority. And I don't know, first of all, are we leaving people behind if we make the raids harder? One. And two, how do you make it harder and how do you make it more engaging universally without just, it's a complex problem. It should be in the player's hands. And I agree with that point.
Let me throw it over to DefCamp for a second I'll piggyback off of this one because I feel like you've got a fair bit on this one given, a lot of you guys are hardcore players and Ayle obviously rolls around with one of the top guilds. A lot of you guys play with great guilds. But DefCamp, Melderon brings up a great point in terms of, basically a sober reminder just to not forget about the player base at large. And, you guys are all amazing players. You are vets, you play a lot, and more importantly, you're fucking good at the game. I am not. You guys know this about me. I'm the filthiest of casuals. I'm very much so a regular player. My guild, would laugh at some of the passes I've been putting up recently, my great old 13 on my Shadow Priest and stuff like that. But when I think of the difficulty in TBC, a lot of people do say, don't change a fucking thing because the game is harder than vanilla. Blizzard upped their game with TBC raids. So the average player, and maybe even more than the average player, will hit a blockade every now and again with the difficulty. So there's no need to tinker with the game. Do you agree with that? Or do you still feel that we need to somewhat cater to what is in and of itself a slightly more hardcore player base? And let's all admit that the average player in Classic is probably a little bit more hardcore than the average player elsewhere.
Yeah. So I think a big issue that people are kind of not seeing in the player base is that, look how many people have cleared AQ. A lot of people are going to clear next, right? So think about how many people are going to be going into TBC content with tier 3 gear, right? Tier 3 as a healer, it gives you, I already have fully buffed over 1300 bonus healing, right? That's pretty much higher than what you have in pre-bis TBC, right? So having tier 3, the set bonuses, having, these items is going to trivialize this content even more. Back in TBC, not a lot of people ran tier 3. Not a lot of people were as geared as we are today. So going into this content with the gear that we have, with the knowledge that we have, and all these things together are really, really going to have a huge impact. And I think people don't realize that as much as they want to admit, maybe. So I think it's going to be probably necessary in my mind. And this goes to, I'm talking about the average player, right? The average player is going to have a way more, and I'm trying to put this in anyone can understand this, right? The average player is going to have a much more higher degree of gear and talent than they would have back then, right? So I think with that understanding, why not increase the difficulty slightly, a little bit, maybe 20%? I'm not saying we have to go crazy, right? But why not, like Melderon was saying, like North was saying, increase the amount of. I don't think we should change the boss fights to the point where it's a complete like Kalthos isn't even Kalthos anymore, right? I think we should still have the boss fight feeling like the boss that we remembered, but increasing maybe the amount of mechanics, doing things that aren't going to cause so much of an issue, in the fight. But there are things I think that need to be done when knowing that this player base is going to be much more equipped than we were back in 2006, right?
And if you want to preserve the feel of those boss fights without changing them at all, right? Without changing the essential mechanics, make the DPS checks harder, make the healing checks harder on tanks, make the void zones harder. Right, that's
Absolutely.
really all you need to do, right? Make the one-shot mechanics harder, make the healing harder, make the DPS harder, make the tanking harder. Just make everything harder as it is, right? And don't change the mechanics, and you've preserved the feel of TBC, given that we have 2.4.3 talents, we're all going to have tier 3, we have better itemization, right? Like, let those things exist, right? Because they're going to do that to simplify the game, to simplify the amount of development, given they have a smaller team. But, we'll compensate for it. Compensate for those changes that we'll have, so that we, like Dextros was saying earlier, right? So that we have those, we have the feel of it, right? Because, like someone said earlier, mages didn't have instant arcane explosion until next patch, right? Like don't discount the immense amount of changes that those talent trees have even by themselves, not even the gear, because like say we go progressive itemization, even the talents themselves, right, cause a large amount of difference. So
how do you make that decision if the game hasn't been released yet, right? So Classic obviously has been a pushover for a lot of people, and that's fine and dandy. And then if there's Classic Plus, you can do those things, North. How do we know the player base is going to react the same way to TBC?
Private servers. They were an excellent case study before. It was exactly the same.
From private servers are going to be in TBC Classic.
It wasn't the case of how many people, right? Because even on private servers, you had less of an issue with things, right? Like this existing, right? With metagaming existing as a whole, because raids were generally tuned harder, right? Content was tuned harder. You had a lot less issues. Spell cleave couldn't exist because stockades mobs were doing as much as SM mobs in terms of damage, right? So when you do up those things, you do prevent this level of min-maxing, which is beneficial. But the reason why you know it for sure is because when servers release with unbuffed 2.4.3 with the standard content, which is much better known and much better documented than vanilla content, so it's actually much more accurate, right? When you have those things released, people steamroll it. Everyone steamrolls it. It's not just people steamroll it. People can steamroll a Vash with 3 times as much health and do it in a week. In like going from 1 to 70, they can do it. They've cleared Vash with 3 times as much health, with multi-shots, one-shotting raid, with mind controls on tanks. They've beaten Vash in a week. Going from level 1. So, I mean, like, don't underestimate the player base.
No, fair enough. Very good point. Ayle, I just want to finish up on this topic with you, mate. And Willie, I'm going to get you to kick off the next one, mate.
Sure.
Ayle, you obviously play with the guild. You play with Onslaught, Mr. Onslaught, as some people call you, heavily
nobody tells me that.
Heavily entrenched.
I do.
I think, yeah. Heavily entrenched in the speedrunning side of the game as well. So, you might have a different angle on this slightly, but how do you feel about everything you've heard? How do you feel about the difficulty tweaks going into TBC if anything were to be done? And also just my own 2 cents, we kicked off the show with this and you guys have just repeated it. The point is the feel to me, and I would like to see great guilds kicking ass with the same challenges that we faced back in the day. I want to see them go through all the phases of a fight rather than just burning something down 30 seconds in. I don't know. It just feels a little bit weird to me. It doesn't feel like the way the game was supposed to be, the way the content was supposed to be experienced. But Ayle, go for it. I'll let you tee off.
I agree a lot with like kind of what Melderon says, that I don't really think they're going to do a whole lot. So my kind of thought is that I hope they do something. So like if those are our options, we basically have like a 2.4.3, or maybe they can do some sort of like limited progressive, but they probably won't do very much in that. I'm always going to go for what's the most challenging, most engaging, which would be some sort of progressive unnerfed fights. Ideally itemization. I really don't think we would get that, but I'm always erring on the side of more challenge instead of less, right? The more challenging something is, kind of the more you have to innovate or come up with new strategies or try different things, or hopefully, like sometimes depending on what it is, that actually becomes less because you end up just like raid stacking more or things like that. But I'm hoping it isn't something that's too easy where the community just steamrolls it, right? I'm hoping for something that, I don't know, like I said, hopefully progressive.
Fair enough. Now, guys, I want to move on to the next topic, and Willie and Mad, I want to get your guys' takes on this one, and anyone else jump in after that. But Willie, you've talked about this a lot in your videos recently, and you are a channel that focuses on the issues very much so with Classic, and we've had things like bots and everything, but we've also had a lot of talk about the gold cap. And you play a lot of everyone here plays a lot of Classic. You play a shitload of Classic. Mad Season plays a shitload of Classic. You guys must have built up some substantial gold reservoirs by now. Now, how do you feel about Willie, I know you've touched on this recently in your videos as well, because I watched them all, and I smashed that like button because I'm a good boy.
Of course.
But,
of course.
How do you feel about an untouched, because my impression is it would be a bold move by Blizzard. And sorry, one more thing I should say. This is the biggest caveat of all to this conversation that we're having here today. We fucking know that Blizzard is probably not going to do any of this stuff. We're very, very based in reality in terms of what is more than likely going to happen with TBC Classic, which is, stay the course for the most part, and nothing much is going to change. This is just a conversation amongst friends, just hypothetically about what would your ideal Classic maybe look like.
But speak for yourself though, Josh. I have said this, and I stake my life on preferring fiction to reality. So, I mean, calling me grounded in reality is
fair enough. Fair enough.
Is a mistake is best.
Fair enough. Ayle,
I think they're going to make all the changes.
Ayle, have you got to head off, man?
I got to.
All right, man. No worries. We'll catch you later. Thanks so much for dropping by.
Take it easy, Ayle.
Yes,
brother. See you, Onslaught guy.
Mr. Onslaught. So,
Mr.
Willie,
Onslaught, yeah.
Willie, what I'm getting at is,
I guess,
how do you feel about it? And, I can't see them not just doing everything as is. It does seem antithetical to an MMO experience to start to tinker with what we take into an expansion.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually one of the hardest things to have to face because it's such a blindingly obvious, this will be a problem, but I don't think they can do anything about it. Like TBC is so heavily gold driven early for, especially items. Well, depends really how we launch, but a lot of crafting items are, heavily gold driven. Got your artisan flying, that's 5k, which is a hell of a lot of gold for a lot of people. And then on top of that, you've got all the various leveling professions, people re-rolling depending on, what they'll be going to. There'll be a lot of people moving away from engineering, potentially going level working. And even if they were to limit the actual gold values that's taken over, that doesn't stop you from just buying a crap load of items and bringing them over instead. It really is one of the toughest things to think about because I don't think there is an ideal solution to it. What would be a good start, first of all, is if they actually limited what you could take from server to server. Because at the moment, the only limitation is 2k gold, where you can take an unlimited amount of items and bring a stupid amount of new stuff into a different server. But I suppose that's a bit of a separate thing. But in terms of my ideal thing that they could do, I don't know. I don't think you could change it. I mean, I imagine the people who know everything will have all the gold after about the space of a week anyway.
Couldn't you just, the simple solution, would be perhaps the most sweeping solution. If you just remove legitimately every trade good, every BOE item, everything that's not bound to you. If it's not bound to you, if it's tradable to another player, and if it's gold, right, beyond 100, you remove it, right? Like, what's the problem with that? Realistically? In terms of the solutions to the issue of money, right? Does that not solve everything?
No.
Why?
I don't know. It just creates new issues, really. Imagine your average player like that. They're told, you can transfer here. By the way, your whole, pretty much everything you got in your bank, that's gone.
or adding, right, like we said earlier, right, saying, right, like adding specific servers where that's the case, right? Maybe that's the plus. Maybe the plus there is you transfer here, you lose, right? You can't transfer with any trade goods. They'll be automatically deleted. You can't transfer with gold above 100, right? It'll be deleted, right? No, but we're talking about ideals here. What would that not solve, right? If we're talking about the issues with gold, the issues with the gold cap, the issues with what you can bring over, what would that not solve? Because it would make dailies relevant. It would make gathering in the old world relevant because you still have a lot of flasks that rely on Black Lotuses.
Sure.
Right, you would still have gathering relevant in the old world. In the new world, you wouldn't have egregiously inflated prices reliant on having had a mage in Classic and farmed up 40k gold. So, I mean, what doesn't it solve then?
But then, if you're just talking about removing the items, you're talking about not touching the gold and just removing the items, right?
No, both.
Oh, both. Sorry. I'm
limiting you to 100 gold, and removing all BOE items that you could trade to another player.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you keep all your gear. You keep all your gear, you remove all your Lotuses, all of your dream foil, right? All that's gone, right?
So let's
have left.
Think about in actual reality what could happen. Because
what doesn't that know? But what as a thought experiment, what doesn't that solve? Does that solve it?
Saying that's
all it does is create an angry player base.
I don't think that exactly. I think that would just create too many frustrated people, and Blizzard would never do that. And I think that's why. But I don't know. I've thought about this a lot. Like, I put a lot of thought into this, and I think at the end of the day, I've thought about, okay, you can have a 10k gold cap. You can, then you're gonna have people who are gonna bring over all this, jewel crafting, math and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, we're gonna have botters. We're gonna have fucking, gold farmers. We're gonna have multiboxers and all this shit, right? So, I pretty much thought it like this. I'm like, just fucking let people bring as much shit as they're going to bring, because it's going to happen anyway. Either way, you look back at what happened in actual TBC, right? So obviously people knew TBC was coming. People knew that Joel Crampton was coming. A lot of the people who were who knew shit, saved up their mats, saved up a lot of money. But the most
people didn't have 10 tailoring alts. People didn't have 10 tailoring alts ready to make all the spell cloth they need in one day.
90% of the player base has under 1,000 fucking gold. Right?
Yeah.
So
but Jerome, a single player with a multi-boxed army of 55 mages or whatever he has will single-handedly destroy an economy via having all those characters have tailoring, because they do not underestimate the fact that people now know what they need to bring over, right? And if you don't limit the ability of them to bring over the things that they need, they will completely trash the economy.
In a month, he'll make the gold back because he'll be the one getting all that shit first and putting it on the auction house, and he'll make that. I don't think it's.
But at least other people will have a chance.
I think people will still have it. I think it's still not going to be as it's still not going to Here's the thing, right? Right now we still have people that have massive amounts of fucking gold, and the economy is still doing kind of okay, right? Shit, yeah, is shit, horribly fucking. You can buy a
Crusader
or for 8 gold or whatever. At the end of the day, I think it's not going to be the big issue that we're all thinking. There's going to be people who are crazy fucking rich. There's going to be some people who, some of the items are going to be different. The economy is just going to be different than it was.
Here's the impasse. Here's the difference.
Make it quick, man. Then I'll throw it to Mad.
Yeah. Here's the difference between TBC and Classic, right? Other than Black Lotus, which they had to solve, right, because of how limited it was, there are way more mats in TBC, like Primal Airs, for example. There are 2 spots to farm Primal Airs.
I understand that. And
the multi-boxers will be there, spamming Arcane Explosion. There will be one person able to farm there, and Primal Airs will then be 30,000 gold each.
Well, that doesn't but that's not solving the issue. See, I understand that, North, and what I'm saying though is taking all the gold out isn't going to solve that. That's still going to happen though, right? That's still going to happen.
It's delaying the inevitable.
There's going to be someone multi-boxing there, even if you take all the gold out.
But the same reason why we don't just rely on people not to have, right, not to murder each other. We have punishments for it, and we have things that encourage people not to murder each other, laws, right, and incentives to do that, because by giving incentives and making rules that prevent that kind of behavior, even though it's going to happen in some amount, it will happen less, which is better for more people. It's utilitarian.
I'll jump in here and throw it over to Mad Season because I just want to get his take on this one. And guys, by the way, I'm fucking loving this. And like I said, I do give North a bit of a longer leash because I love some of the stuff that he says. So don't worry about that, North. But Mad, if I were to say that the Taxman was coming for your gold reservoirs, I'm not sure how much gold do you have built up right now?
I'm a warrior, man. I have about 1,000 to my name.
Okay.
But I will say that, rank 14. Oh, oof, that was
congrats,
was
dude. Congrats.
I owe people gold. I have negative gold. But I will say that it is a huge issue, and I don't think there's really any way to control it realistically, because I know plenty of people right now who have level 50 alts specifically to go into Burning Crusade for the spell cloth and also the transmute to forget the name of the transmute. I think it's the Primal Nether or something. You take
Primal Might.
There you go. Yeah. There were definitely gold kingpins back in the day. I know one guy who hit the gold cap. The original gold cap was I thought 120,000 or something. He was an enchanter on our server that for several months only had a certain, I think he had the 15 agility glove enchant in AQ. But obviously it's much more prolific today. Many more people have many more gold. I would say, I don't know. I kind of like to fall back on that answer and give the players the choice. In that survey, they showed several different ways of transitioning to BC. Either the servers transition to BC naturally. You have the option to transfer off if you want to stay classic, or vice versa. You transfer off you stay on and then you can transfer to a BC server. Or you have level 1 characters and you have level 58 characters that you make. So I think if it's a huge issue for people, if they decide to go with, all of those routes, which I am a fan of, then they can kind of pick and choose okay, well, I want more of a fresh start. So I want to go with, the level 1 server, for instance. But just for the sake of trying to offer up a solution, I guess I would say that I would be a fan of just maybe specifically regarding like flying here, increasing the cost from maybe like 5,000 to like, 7,000, 8,000 or something. I don't know, but like really you need to have access to how much gold people have because, you have casual, hardcore and everything in between. So even that is not really a bulletproof solution.
Yeah. And that raises and as you say, it's such a difficult one because Blizzard really does have to think of everyone at the end of the day. And even though it's a more hardcore crowd, we've got casuals like me. Cause when I hear you say Mad Season, maybe we'll up it to 8K, my wallet goes, fuck.
Exactly. And that's, most people they could have 1 to 2K gold,
But
I've got 100.
person, right? One person in control of the economy can single, and this happened on my server. This happened on Sal. There was one person, and I don't engage in this behavior anymore. I don't flip items aggressively anymore. But that's how I made most of my money in phase 1 to phase 2. And I still haven't farmed since phase 1 because I made so much money doing that, right? This guy single-handedly though, when I was doing it as well, right? He single-handedly had gold cap, right? Within a month. Of being in, he had 120K within a month of launch, right? When people didn't have that much money, right? On Stalag, and he single-handedly raised the prices of consumes by himself quadruple. And that's not at all an exaggeration, right? Quadruple the price for the average player.
Willie, I want to get you to tie off on this one, and then North, you'll be kicking off the next topic of drums. So get your mind wrapped around that one. But Willie, I just want to finish up with the point that DefCamp made regarding gold, because he's quite right, I think, and I'm sure there's some big brain economists listening to this podcast who'll probably shoot me down in this theory, but I really feel like the current classic economy, as fucked up as it is for all you hardcore guys where things are so expensive and you want to buy all your, righteous orbs or whatever the fuck it is that you big brains do, that I don't, get involved in. I just go out and do a little PvP and do a little stupid shit on the side. But, when I go out and farm and I want to sell something, it fucking sells for a lot of money. So it doesn't take a lot of time for me to build a pretty decent gold reserve because I'm also then not spending that money on high cost items. So I always thought the current classic economy, as perfectly fucked up as it is, if you want to describe it as that, is relatively casual friendly. So I think there's a give and take there if we have the same thing moving into TBC. But I'm sure there's a lot wrong with what I just said and people will email me about it. Please do. But Willie, I'll give you the last point on everything you just heard regarding the gold cap.
Yeah, I mean, from a casual point of view, it's fantastic. Everything sells for so much. I was leveling a Horde Warlock because I leveled too many characters, and he's level 23, and he's got nearly 30 gold. And I haven't been doing anything special, and it's on a new server. You just get so much gold. It's crazy. And as well, I was just thinking while you're all talking about it, the actual only real items which consistently heavily take a hit are the ones that get absolutely slammed by bots. You've seen it with Plague Bloom, with Black Lotus in the past, and to some degree now, with things like Righteous Orbs especially. I've seen some screenshots of them being literally vendor price, where they continue to be useful. They'll be good even in TBC. They'll be worth putting on your Shaman or Paladins that you're leveling up on their weapons.
And even before people get mangas, people opt for it. So
yeah, there you go. But yeah, I think overall it's why you just probably have to leave as it is. There'll no doubt be the items which have a static price, things like flying that was brought up, which are just not sort of as big a deal as they were back then. 5K back then was quite a bit more of a bigger deal. Even epic mounts were in Classic. But I think the player demand variation of items might be a bit more reasonable, partially due to server size and just the overall value of gold as a whole. So sort of hoping it may to some degree solve itself, but then again, North says, there's occasionally people who just have enough money to ruin it for everyone else, but the economy is quite developed at this point, so maybe that won't be as much.
I got one question for you guys.
Go
what do you guys think? I don't know, this won't solve everything, but banning multiboxers.
Oh, well, it won't happen.
I know. I don't think they make enough money from it.
It would be good. It would be good.
Yeah.
It would obviously be good. It won't happen, right? So we always say that about so many things. Yeah. But obviously it would be fantastic.
DefCamp's right though. Actually, it would be fascinating to see exactly what percentage of the classic income comes from multi-boxes, because it can't be considerable.
It's not even.
That's what I'm saying. Like, how
it's
can
not even that.
justify
It's
it?
not even that much, and one person just has so much. Right? Like as much as I love Jerome. Right? The fact that he can single-handedly wipe guilds is bad for the game in a very real and pronounced way.
Yeah,
100%.
It's pay to win, dude.
Yeah,
it's literally.
I know what you mean. All right, North. I've set you up. I've put the ball on the tee. Drums, mate. It's going to be a big one coming into TBC as a talking point. It seems rather innocuous on the surface, as, you know, it's just tied into professions, seems pretty surface level okay. But a lot of people are starting to grumble that, you know, is this pseudo the next world buff issue, in a certain way, not quite as hampering, but, you know, people are saying they'll feel obligated to take leatherworking because you've got to have the rolling drums going, and it effectively takes away one of two choices that you have in TBC in terms of what two professions will you pick, and people will go, well, it's not two choices, it's one, because fucking everyone is making me go leatherworking, and then the response is always, no one can make you do anything, do what you want to do, and it's like, yeah, I can do what I want to do, but then I'll fall behind the pack because I don't have fucking leatherworking. So how do you feel about drums and whether or not you would change anything with that in TBC?
I mean, right, I'm team elevator, right? I'm here for changing everything. I mean, remove drums, right? Not actually. I think drums are actually very, very cool. But there are a lot of options they could go with, right? As they go with this Frankenpatch kind of deal. They could make drums in 2.0. Drums had a much, much smaller drumming distance. Right? Mm-hmm. So you couldn't actually have the whole raid, right? Like you didn't actually, right? And drums of battle are intensely good. You know, it's a 10% haste buff, right? It's a mini bloodlust that you can have running at all times with only 4 players in a group having leatherworking, right? At a cost of like I forget if it's 1 or 2 second cast because I don't have leatherworking because I don't care enough, and you don't really need it on Arcane Mage, and everyone else in my group has a drum, so I can get by. Yeah, I'm greedy. I'm the asshole in my group. But anyway, I think that they should revert it to the smaller range because it makes it a lot less practical, a lot less, hey, you need this absolutely. And it makes it more focused on, hey, if you want to min-max this, you have to have your players actually stacked together for it. So there actually is a mechanic that comes into, hey, I have to play this effectively. And if you release with later versions of other stuff, like later versions of the engineering goggles, a lot of people are going to go engineering. Right, especially tanks, so you get those stam trinkets that are really, really powerful, even on 2.0 that are really, really solid. You know, the rocket launcher for pulling is really great for warriors and even paladins. So you have a lot of options available for other things. Tailoring is still going to be required for a lot of people, but with 2.4.3 here, even my class personally, I don't actually need as an arcane mage, I don't need spell strike. Spellfire is useful, but if I get full tier 5, I don't need that either. So, like, right, there are ways of circumventing these things if they're just a little less powerful, and there are things making it those professions a little less powerful and encouraging things like engineering already if they just make a few small tweaks, like the drum distance. So, in summation, drums, yes, are good. Yes, they are a lot, but especially given, and this thing I haven't touched on, and it'll be the last point, is that the content is going to be easy enough, probably, given that they won't buff it, that it won't really be necessary. It'll be a parse brain thing. So for the parse brains, obviously all the min-max things are always going to be required. But even for the parse brains, if they just nerf a little bit, they're going to give that choice back to everyone, which is a good thing. And you'll see people actually roll engineering for the goggles and for the ability to suck clouds, for those primal airs, right? You'll see people, rolling tailoring and having gathering professions and being able to be, that powerhouse gatherer, getting that mana thistle, right? Getting whatever it is you need and being able to have that choice back, which I think would be really, really good.
But let's be real. The parse brains is pretty much everyone now, isn't it?
Well, if you make the content more difficult, the parse brains kind of die out, right? And that's why I think it's so important, and that's why I'm so, vehemently, hey, changes, please make these things harder, because the parse brains die out if you're dying on the content, right? If you die to it, you can't parse, you just, right, you die.
Melderon, mate, I have a funny feeling that this would be a topic that would be ripe for a very solemnly worded Melderon video, much like what we got with World Buffs. What are your thoughts on all this?
So I just want to go, I think I've come up as a pessimist this entire time, unfortunately, but because I'm not. But so I want the game to be as hard as possible. And I probably didn't come off that way because I don't want Blizzard. I don't think Blizzard's going to do anything about it. The best case scenario would be they remove them from the game, but I don't think they're nearly as impactful as World Buffs are, right? Because World Buffs are impactful in every single facet of the game. And they're impactful negatively to people's time, how they feel when they die, right? If you wipe, you can still use drums, right? if you're not going to get kicked out of a raid because you freak out because you don't have your drum. Like it's a problem, sure, but it's in my eyes, it's nowhere near as pervasive as world buffs are.
It's not going to be as pervasive, but it still will be that like, hey, like let's gatekeep this based on you min-maxing, right? Everyone has to get world buffs. Sure. Everyone has to get drums.
So that's a problem.
I think.
That's where it's the problem, right? That's where it compares the world buffs. Do I want them to get rid of them? Sure. Do I want them to nerf them? Yes. Is it going to happen? No. It's not. It's not going to happen. And I know it sounds terrible to say that, but I just know Blizz at this point.
I hear.
It's the company, a flying pig, like.
Go for it, Willie. Just coming in with a quick post-production note here, everyone. Given that podcasts aren't exactly a visual medium, Willie is about to talk about an ability that he found on Wowhead called Tinnitus, Tinnitus, which I highly encourage you look up now so that you can follow along with what the boys are about to discuss. All right, let's throw it back to them.
So, I just put a little something in the chat. I don't know if you could show on stream as well, but that is something introduced in patch 2.43, which basically killed off drum rotations by giving you a little mini exhaustion debuff.
Mm-hmm.
So you only needed one drummer per group. There's comments from Wellhead on 2.43 there.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Someone made me aware of this. I didn't know this was a thing.
Oh,
but I mean, it checks out time-wise at least. When you use a drum, then the other people in your party get a debuff, so you can't rotate them anymore. So yeah, basically nerf drums. I don't want to be a level worker, man. Like the thing is about, because you say about TBC, you'd be like, well, I play a lock, right? So obviously I'm going to be tailoring. Yes, but there's other benefits I get from tailoring rather than one item that I take into raid and is otherwise pretty much useless for me. I think the only other thing you get from leatherworking are the resist armor kits as a non-leather wearing class. So it's not very exciting as a choice when I've got other things which I'd rather look into. And that's sort of the issue with the drums for me. Plus, you say you'd only need 4 per group, but it'll probably be 5 unless you're in a really organized guild. So if someone doesn't show up or whatever it may be, and you don't want to be the guy letting the team down, do you?
Yeah, true. But I mean, at that point, like when you're min-maxing that heavily, you want, like, for instance, you want the Arcane Mage in a group, for instance, to have extra spell power, so you let them go enchanting because you obviously need an enchanter. Where you can have an enchanter and then having the extra spell power in your rings is actually more beneficial. So like when you get down to the very min-max, it does solve its own problem in terms of giving availability because there are other benefits, right? You want the engineer, right? You can deal with an engineering enchanting, which is what I'm going to be going. If like, depending on like what is exactly is out, but that's what I'm planning on going because precisely, right? Like you can run it and it's biz.
Yeah, so exactly.
Can't find it in the patch notes. I'm going to keep looking.
That doesn't exist. That was a proposed.
I think
like,
that was a wrap.
Database.
Was that a wrap?
Yeah, it was a beta thing.
Pre-patch.
Yeah, I think it was pre-patch, and then it wasn't in beta anymore because they just didn't. They didn't. I
remember going to look through the patch notes as well because I usually like to double check these things. And what was the deal with drums in Wrath? Was it still a thing? I don't know.
Yes.
This, even though if it wasn't in the game, I kind of like it as a proposal. You can usually work out one person per group who actually wants to be leatherworking, rather than having...
So this is something I think they would do because it has a history and it has a precedent and it probably still exists in some database.
It would be really good as well, right? Like, it would be fantastic because you only have one per group, and then that's like so much choice is added back, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's what they would do because that's actually turned my answer. I think that's something they should do. And Ayle's point about the no one complains about the hunter buff. It was supposed to be in the game, right? It had a history that was supposed to happen. Improved weapon totems was actually supposed to work and never did. I think that's the only thing they'll ever do is stuff that maybe was on the cutting room floor and had a chance to be there and just never got there. And I think
war games are a good example. Like stuff that wasn't in the
100%.
Right, wasn't in the pipeline. It's like vehemently, like strictly no changes, and they still added that back, right? Like they added it to it because it makes sense and it makes the player base really happy. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for them to add things that are going to make people adding that choice factor progressions will make people really happy.
The great irony and the problematic thing with war games was that great concept. I just feel like not that many people are using it. That's the tragedy behind it. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a lot of people are using it, but that's the kind of the impression I've gotten. But Mad Season, I'll get you to finish up on that one. Then I've got one final quick topic, guys. Mad, any strong feelings about drums in TBC?
I would be a fan of that tinnitus in game, not real life. It's you can make comparisons to this with engineering in Classic. Engineering is like the required thing. My guild required engineering for Vicitus specifically, and World PvP. Try doing a heated battleground without engineering. Go to that blacksmith fight, and you'll just get absolutely dominated by people popping sappers, and not to mention rocket helmets and all that stuff. I'm not sure, and this comes from my casual play in BC. How was engineer in BC? Was that still as strong as it was in Classic?
So here's the thing about engineering is that early on it actually was for World PvP specifically because discombobulator arrays still worked, so you could dismount people in midair. So that was nerfed in 2.1 or even before 2.1 potentially. I don't think it should have been, because it's actually really cool and it gives you a very good reason to be engineering, but people are like, I die. So, but, and the helmets weren't added, like the helmets they were added, but they weren't really good. In 2.4.3, and I believe it's in 2.1 that the helmets are introduced, like the better helmets. Those helmets are actually very, very strong. The grenades, especially for tanks, are really, really strong because they work on a lot of encounters, like Vash having grenades for Vash, when it works on the Striders, for instance, which is a mob that you kite, is very effective. It's really good for tank trinkets. So there are reasons to go engineering, very real reasons. I mean, even in 2.0, engineering stuff worked in arenas, right? So, I mean, there were very real reasons back then that's not going to be introduced. There's no shot in hell. But I mean, with the nitro boost as well, it's really, really good in battlegrounds. So we do that. There are very real reasons to go engineering in a 2.4.3 setting. In a 2.0 setting, not really. But, more of a reason for tanks anyway, just because drums aren't as good. Especially for tanks, but there's a lot less choice. So I mean, drums are the limiting factor in terms of choosing engineering when it comes down to it, because a lot of people have to go tailoring, like specifically for casters. They don't get a choice because they have to go leatherworking tailoring. So engineering is added back to the palette for blacksmiths and gathering profession people. If leatherworking is nerfed, it is the gatekeeper.
Yeah, and in regards to changes too. We've been talking, if you go down this route, if Blizzard decides to go down this route, you've been talking about like nerfing one thing, but I think also another route you could go down is just buffing other professions. One of the things I really liked about Wrath, if you guys remember Jewel Crafters had the Dragon's Eye? Was that in Wrath or was it Chimera's Eye?
Yeah, Chimera's Eye, yeah.
Blacksmiths had a stamina buff. If I remember, they had more health
and an extra socket. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the belt buckle.
They got the extra socket. Engineers got the cape and the glove enchant. Right, so you had every profession had like really, really strong options for it. Yep. Leatherworking had the extra, like you had the better leg enchant. Yep. Same thing with tailoring. So I mean, every profession, right? And it made it, it made it kind of equal. It made it kind of equal, like across the board, which the people like, oh, it's homogenous. But I think professions in Wrath were really, really good.
Yeah, they were great. Yeah.
All right, guys.
I think they're great at TBC as well.
Let's move on to the final topic. You've been so kind and given me 2 hours of your time here tonight. It might be a quick one. Let's see how we go. I actually know fuck all about this one, and when I say that, I really mean it. It's about Arena, and I feel like we'd be remiss not to talk about Arena. But the one thing, it seems pretty straightforward. That we'll get into all the PvP meta later on in the podcast. But if we're talking about issues, one thing I don't really know much about but comes up is the concept of selling positions, I believe, is what people refer to it as in your rated arena teams. And, I'm not sure if this is something will come up if we get a TBC Classic. People are saying, we might. But I'll read you a couple of quotes from the TBC subreddit again and see if you guys can pick up on what these guys are putting down. Centality says, I'd recommend that we fix the selling of positions in rated arena teams and the loophole of just deleting and recreating a team for points. And then Zed Guidance says, deleting your arena team and reforming was absolutely a problem in the original TBC, and it seriously undermined the supposed ELO nature, or ELO, however you say it, of the ranking system and led to massive rating inflation over the course of a season. You guys, I'm not sure if there's any hardcore arena players here, but please shout out if you are.
I did, I played pretty hard. I got 2.3K in TBC, something like that. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, 2.3K. I didn't get.
Wait, which season?
Season 2.
Wait, 2.3 in season 2 is like near rank 1.
I played Rogue.
You want an arena partner for BC?
Holy heck!
Rogue Warrior.
I played Rogue Mage 2v2. 2v2 was the biggest thing back then.
What spec was your mage? Was your mage pump pirate?
My mage was Frost. No, Frost.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's been a while. But so here's the thing with selling, right? So I've seen it happen to an extent, and we have the issue in TBC, right, where when you delete your team, you have the rating still, right? So it's going to be there. I've always said this, right? You still have to be somewhat of an okay PvPer to be able to, get carried, I guess. But like, I don't think we're going to see it. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue that a lot of people think it's going to be. I think this about a lot of things, right? I think that people overplay things in their head. They think, oh, this is going to be a huge issue. People are going to be selling, you're going to have druids or maybe a really good couple druids, selling runs. But like, you still need an okay PvPer to be able to do pretty decent, to get into higher, to get into the higher ratings, right? So I don't think it's going to be the huge issue that people think it is. I mean, obviously, like when I played back in, season 1, season 2, 2v2 was more of the meta. A lot of people did 2v2 over, 3v3 was getting more popular towards the end of TBC. But, I think, so we'll see, people probably, selling runs in like 3v3 teams, this, that, and the other. But I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue that people think. I don't know. What do you guys think? I don't think it's going to be horribly, I don't think we're going to see it like happening all the time, at least to what I've seen it back in the day. And like, I kind of stopped doing arena back in like, I still dabbled around Kata, and I mostly played, in TBC, and Wrath is one of my big arena stint was, but it has always been an issue, right? It's always been an issue, but I don't think it's going to be something that's going to be relatively, I don't know, fucking game break. Like, I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't see it happening more than it did back in the day. I never did carries or anything, but I know a friend who paid like 3-4 semesters of college through arena carries, sold it for real life money. And you see this in Classic as well. No matter what, people will always try to find a way to pay money to progress their character. As far as like gold buying is concerned, and up until this level 1 delete nerf with the level 1 alts to increase the pool party, the meta on my server and many others is people would pay multiboxers to create basically bracket slots. So the way it works is the higher the pool size, the higher the bracket slots are. Therefore, the more people can rank up. So, I'll pay this guy to make 300 and something level 1 alts to allow me to get to bracket 1, which will, knock off a month or so of my ranking. But yeah, absolutely. It was prolific back in the day, but I don't really see this as something being more prolific in the re-release. So I guess in that way, it's actually similar to how it was back then, but, certainly there are issues with it. As far as like real money trading is concerned, Blizzard should step in and, look at the TOS and probably ban people, but, it's a bot problem in Classic, so is that really going to happen?
Yeah.
Willie, go for it, man.
With the arena thing, I'm a bit, I'm not very, not exactly the biggest arena player back in the day due to the internet being terrible and, branching and melee leeway and pillars. And I don't know if you've talked about that earlier anyway, but that's like a whole different thing. But wondering as well, with not just the selling, but win trading, was that ever like fixed?
They banned for win trading back then, or suspended at least. So
yeah. So what's going to happen in 2020?
That was that got nipped in the bud pretty. It's still happened occasionally, but yeah.
It's like when people were manually pool boosting, not even doing it for bots, and there was like never any official word, and it's like, is this the thing we should be doing?
Yeah. I mean, when you're talking about that, like specifically, you talk about like, people selling and it really, and when you look into like a lot of fucking people do it, like in the high end, and it happens like, and it happens casually a lot too. Like, it'll be like, hey, you know, like, so the way it happens in the circle of like, okay, like, you know, a team that has, you know, pretty good rating, people get the word of mouth. Okay, hey, these people are basically, you know, carrying people through, right? And, you know, some people will, you know, trade, you know, certain things like, okay, hey, like, you know, I mean, we used to, run a couple people through in 3v3 and like, you know, next time around and like, you know, raid like, hey, if this item drops, like, let me get it, like little shit like that. Like, I don't know, is that considered like against TOS? Like, I you know what I mean? But like, it has to be like gold or real money, right? So like, shit like that happens all the time where people carry people through. And like, listen, you know, it's going to probably be a little, like, there's going to be really good fucking there's been people who like, you know, I'm fucking rusty. I really didn't do much PvP on private servers when I played on TBC private servers, right? So like, there are people out there now that are fucking, you know, good. They've been playing, you know, these comps for years now, right? So like, the competition in TBC for Arena is going to be very high, a lot higher than it was back in the day, right? So I think you're going to come across teams once you get past a certain threshold, once you get past 2.2, I think you're going to reach a threshold where people are going to be so good that it's going to be hard to really, if you're a shitty player, to buy your way up past like a 2.2 rating, you know? I mean, that's what I kind of see happening.
Fair enough. And I'll finish up on that topic with Ayle in chat, just stating maybe from the road. He thinks it will be bad. The LO system in TBC is based on a team rating, not personal. You sell 3 games on a 2K team and they get the full 2K points. So we might leave it there on maybe a harbinger of things to come. Perhaps we'll keep an eye on that one. But guys, as we wrap up, I'll say our goodbyes, but just one quick thing that I think people would be, you know, screaming at if we didn't at least touch on just for 3.5 seconds. You know, I haven't talked about things like dual spec, LFR, LFG for a reason. Personally, I am of the opinion that, you know, if we're doing this classic trilogy, you know, if we do Burning Crusade and then Wrath, I feel like a lot of the point behind it is for these expansions to have a certain flavor. But if you start to implement them to, like the Burning Crusade, things like dual spec and LFR, it does change the feel of Burning Crusade a lot. Where do you guys stand on that stuff just really quickly? Are you yay or nay for extreme quality of life changes in TBC?
Beyond the realm of like what I would consider even extreme. Mm-hmm. Like, well, that's beyond elevators to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's to me. That's
dual spec even.
Dual spec is kind of innocuous, to be honest.
I think dual spec is innocuous. The rest of it, though, is really aggressive. But I think dual spec is largely innocuous. I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah, dual spec. I'm sorry, I totally forgot about dual spec. That's pretty innocuous to me. But you're right. That was implemented in Wrath, if I remember correctly.
Correct. Yep. Yes.
So again, that would be a Wrath thing, right? That would be like, oh, Wrath gets this. You know, that's their flavor.
Yeah.
But the other parts of it, Josh, is like beyond elevators to me, like beyond North's elevators. That's just crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's true. You know, when you talk about like, you know, people potentially saying, oh, let's add, you know, multiple difficulties or raids, that way we solve the issue like that. Like, you know, I don't think that solves the issue there. I think that creates more issues. Yeah. You know, I do not like there being, you know, 4 different difficulties and raids. I think that's something that, you know, I'm sure people who play retail now, you know, if they like it or not, but I don't think that's something that would work in TBC. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? But
I'm more, and again, echoing just what I've said before, the theme of my, you know, desires going into TBC is mess with the meta, not with the game, if that makes sense. And when I say the game, I mean things like quality of life and, you know, the framework of the game. If you want to change the carpets inside, like, you know, some of the numbers and stuff, and yeah, I'm fine with that. You know, I don't want people to have a memorized guide and be able to work this game out inside and out. But, you know, quality of life, I do start to feel a little bit uneasy. Not that I'm going to hit the roof if it's in there. I don't think it's going to be in there, but just I feel like a flavor or a taste. You know, I'm going to Burning Crusade. I kind of want the Burning Crusade theme and vibe, and a lot of these quality of life stuff things aren't in there. But you know, the classic community's generally obviously quite accepting of that. You know, people go, oh, mate, you can't get dungeons. I've fucking never had a drama getting dungeons in Classic, and there's people advertising for them all the time. But anyway, Willie, Mad, how do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums up, really. It's, with changing the meta, that can be the interesting part, because so from the start of Classic, people were banging on about no changes because they were worried about exactly that, you know, about LFR, LFG, all of that kind of stuff. And I think we've got past the point where it's obvious that I don't think Blizzard were ever going to do that either. I mean, I was looking at the BlizzCon 2018 footage the other day of the Classic panels, and even then they were like, this is totally out of the realms of any suggestion whatsoever.
Did you see the not pictured Josh Corbett one when they kicked me out of the panel?
Sorry,
what?
Oh, I'll tell you that guy's story later if you haven't heard it.
Oh,
that's the panel that I got kicked out of.
Yeah.
Oh.
I'll tell you that story later.
Damn, Australians aren't allowed, that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But yeah, for most of the big things, yeah, it's a no. I mean, with the dual spec, personally, I don't think you need to go that far. Gold is a bit more easy to come by in TBC.
Yeah.
You could change how the respec system works. I've always kind of liked, instead of it increased in price, if it decreased to like 25 max and started at 50, so you're more incentivized to keep respecking. I thought that could have been interesting, but yeah, it's just a random idea. But yeah, I think, you know, changing the meta it would be a more interesting approach.
All right. Mad?
Yeah, I agree with Will pretty much. I'm a fan of changing the meta a little bit because it combats that stagnation. I still kind of stand by what I said in the beginning of the podcast, and I think it's worth exploring maybe having two versions of the game, splitting up the servers in half of what you would normally do, and then having, you know, a BC and a BC-esque plus server with changes in difficulty and the meta and whatnot. But things such as, you know, LFR and all that stuff, Dungeon Finder, I think would be a bit too extreme. And I'm not sure if they'd ever go down Cataclysm Classic, but, you know, like LFR would be a pretty defining thing of Cataclysm. And I think just putting like any balance aside, if you start bringing in these major features from other expansions to previous expansions, it kind of muddies the water.
And out of interest, you know, mate, do you think we'd have the numbers to support that kind of a split? Like if people did pick their own adventure in TBC?
Well, the way I would do it, so Classic released with 40 servers, so if we had the knowledge now and Blizzard had the willpower, instead of doing 40 servers for US at least, I'm not sure about EU, it would just be 20 servers of no changes that we, for the most part, have now, and then 20 servers of things that were discussed today, such as maybe like raid balance tuning, more progressive class balance changes, and things of that nature. So it would be the same amount of servers, but it would just be a choice between the players.
Fair enough. All right, North, I'll let you finish up on this one, mate, and send us home, North. Summarize everything in one fell swoop, and we'll say our goodbyes.
I think that it's worth like trying to improve this game, right? Despite the fact that there are these defining characteristics, right? Sure, dual spec was added only in Wrath, but it adds a lot of quality of life, or at least changing the respec cost, right? There's some fundamental change to encourage that amount of respecking and encourage people to play multiple specs, right? And like recognize that flying mounts were a problem and fix, right, the changes that were made to prevent people from preventing flying mounts from doing things, right? Never add LFR back because it truncates the game in a bad way. Never add those multiple difficulties back, right? Realize what was good about those eras of the game and don't recreate it just to recreate it, right? Recreate it because it was good, because it was fun, because the feel of it will make a good game, and because we'll all enjoy it, because those are the changes that people love. Those are the changes that people are all here for. The changes that don't affect people negatively, right? Like the Hunter change that makes more people viable, it makes more people have fun and play the game together the way it was intended.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Standing ovation, rousing ovation. Yeah. I love it. Guys, thank you so much for doing this. I really, really do appreciate it. You know, I love all of you very, very dearly. My only question would be, when are we all playing a war game or something together?
I'm down.
Yeah, dude, I'm down. Fuck yeah.
Everyone's
the Alliance.
Load North the fuck up. Show me a real one-shot class is like shaman, you know?
Guys,
I might have a bit of trouble, but I can be a gnome cheerleader if you want.
It's been so much fun, guys. Look, we'll have to try and do this again sometime later down the track. I really do enjoy talking to you all. We've got this little group chat that we can always speak to each other in, but thanks so much for being on the first episode of Countdown to Crusade. It wouldn't have been the same without you, and I wish you all the best in all the content or otherwise that you're doing right now, and I'll say our goodbyes real quick. No kissing on my ass, just say goodbye to the good people. North, go for it.
Well, I'm going to kiss your ass anyway. Josh, thank you so much. You put on a fantastic show. You are amazing. If anything, maybe you should be more liberal on the mute button for me because you've assembled such a fantastic panel of guests. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming out of this. This was so much fun. I love to hear all of you guys. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to be here, and thank you so much.
It's great having you, mate. The brothers Def Camp and Melderon, hit me.
Yeah, I just want to say I truly love each and every one of you guys. I mean that, seriously. Fucking North, I know I give you shit sometimes, but I love you, man. Fucking Willie, Mad Season, you guys are literally like, I watch you guys every fucking day. So it's like every time you guys talk, I feel like I'm watching one of your videos. And Josh, I feel like you're my brother from another mother, man. Seriously, you've helped me so much and just in everything, man. And I really appreciate you. Your show is fucking amazing. And I love you. I really do, brother. Thanks,
mate. All right, Melderon, you still with us?
I'm here, yeah. Thanks for having me, Josh. I just want to say out to the crowd, basically, you guys have a voice. Make your voice be heard. Even though, it may not happen, just, if you feel strongly about something, go to the forums, go to Reddit, and make your voice be heard.
Absolutely. It's like the never-ending story. Just believe, and, have a bit of hope and get your voices out there. Willie, mate, I'm so sorry again for that time fuck up, but, mate, you know that I'd love to have you back on future episodes if you're up for it. So we'll have all the time in the world to make up for it.
Oh, I can't believe I was like 45 minutes late. I'm so mad. Like I missed that much and whatever you're talking about then. But, no, thanks again, Josh, for putting this on, everyone for watching, and what Melderon was saying there, really, do get involved and make your voice heard, because we saw pre-Classic, Blizzard were putting a lot of resources into the game. Could very well be the same kind of thing with TBC, and the most impactful changes could come before the game ever even comes out. So now is the time to be going on about this.
Mad Season, the heavy hitters, last up. Mate, thank you so much for doing this. I love speaking to you. And we'll be keeping an eye out on your channel as well in the future.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I just wanted to say, I've learned a lot just talking with you guys. Like I said, I wasn't super hardcore in BC. That was sort of like my casual expansion. And I just want to say as well that, going into Classic, we didn't know what to expect. It was like, well, other than RuneScape, I think, as far as I know, a re-release of a classic MMO such as this has never been done. But I think we learned a lot over the past year rather, and I think the key is to discuss it just like we're doing now to hopefully make BC as good as it can be.